I am so excited this morning to have a missionary guest with us, and I've lost her. Where are you at, Anna? Come on up, Anna. Anna Rosteck. I shared with you a month or so ago that there was a huge praise report that Anna shared at our ministers' meeting up in Great Falls, and I'm going to let her tell the story. Oh, you come with your tea. That's so hilarious. Tea and water and the whole 9 yards. Love it. Anna, for those of you that have not met Anna before, I've known Anna for decades because she grew up in the church that Chris and I served in Great Falls for many years. But also, Anna was part of our Connect Church family at our Great Falls campus before she went out on the mission field. So Anna is one of our very own connectors who is a missionary overseas. She serves in Burundi, and we've supported her from the beginning, and today we're going to amp the support up. But I've asked Anna to share the teaching time this morning, so would you give her a very warm Connect Church family welcome? And we love you, Anna.
Thank you. Good morning. So I have to apologize. The allergy season is getting me, so I have tea and water so I can function and breathe. I'm not contagious. I just have asthma. It's great. So please pray for me. So my name is Anna Rosteck, and I'm a missionary in East Africa, Burundi, which I did not know where Burundi was when I went. That's always fun. By the way, thank you so much, Russ and Chris, for having me. I really appreciate it. And Russ made breakfast this morning. Oh my gosh, it has ruined me forever. It's so good. I'm gonna think about it. I took a picture. It was good. So, when I was 6 or 7 years old, I attended Central Assembly of God in Great Falls, and there was a missionary couple that came and spoke to us about their time in Africa, and we were able to ask them questions afterwards, and 2 of those questions were, do you live in a mud hut, and do you have to mow the roof? And in that moment, my little heart said, I will never be a missionary, especially in Africa. So exactly, famous last words. So when I was 19, I was attending Northwest University, and I was very materialistic. I wanted a mansion and a Lamborghini. Those were very important to me. I had it planned, vision board, you know. And I read a book about a missionary couple in Congo, Africa, and the woman was pregnant, gave birth to a little girl, and she died. The mother died. And the father said, I'm done with God. I hate him, and I'm leaving. And he took his 3-year-old son back to Europe and left the baby with the missionary couple in Congo. And that they passed the baby on and on and on until she ended up in America. And after many, many years, and a lot of amazing things that happened, the father was able to reconnect with his daughter as she was an adult, and he came back to Christ. And after reading that book, within 3 weeks, God had completely changed my heart for Africa. And I was like, okay, Lord, I'm ready to go. I was 19 years old. Like, I'm ready to go, Lord. Let's do this. And he said, wait. I don't know if any of you are like me. I hate waiting. Very impatient. I'm like, okay, Lord. So I finished up college, and I'm like, okay, Lord, look how brilliant I am now. I'm ready. And he said, wait. Not only did he said wait, but he said, I'm going to break your heart a little bit at a time. That's not a comforting statement from God. So I was like, okay. So I started working at Yellowstone Boys and Girls Ranch in Billings, and talking to one of my coworkers, she was going to get her master's degree in social work. Well, I had really researched what I needed to do to work in East Africa, and that was one of those things that, like, if you have a master's in social work, you can go. I'm like, okay, I need that. I have to have that. So I went and got my master's. I'm like, okay, Lord, look, man, now I'm ready. And he said, wait. I'm like, oh, okay. So I took a job at a little rural school in Sims, Montana. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And worked there for 10 years as their mental health therapist. Everybody I worked with knew I had a heart for Africa, but I also had a heart for them because I believe that if God tells you to wait, he puts things in your path to encourage you and help you. He gives you work along the way. So I did it, and after 10 years, God said, quit your job. I said, okay. I had no other job, which is terrifying. And my actually Connect Church in Great Falls was so helpful because I just started attending there when this had happened. And they were praying for me and loving on me through the 3 months without work, which I had worked since I was 15. So many of you understand that. It's like, oh, what now, Lord? Well, a therapist I knew who was, I'm a therapist. A therapist I knew who was Christian, I felt like I needed to call him. And I asked him if he knew of any place hiring, if anybody needed a job. He goes, actually, the therapist who was working with me just quit, and I need another one, preferably Christian. I'm like, hey, here I am. Thanks, Lord. So I got to work with them for a year, which gave me time because it was work at my own pace and my whatever clients I wanted, whatever days. And so I was able to have more time that I needed, which I didn't know I would. So in January of 2018, I was in Israel, and I was on a pastor's tour because I'm also ordained with the Assemblies of God. So I was on a pastor's tour, and I was all the people I didn't know. I was by myself with a whole bunch of people I didn't know, and we were standing in Jaffa, which was Joppa, which is where Jonah set sail from when he was not supposed to set sail. And it is also where Peter had the vision of the clean and unclean animals. And I was standing there and I said, Lord, can I live here for just 1 year? Just 1 year. And I heard him speak to me and say, no, you're going to Africa. So I'm standing with all these people I don't know sobbing. And I'm like, this is awesome. They were really nice though. So that was January. In July, some missionaries from Africa came to my parents' church. And my mom went up to him and said, hey, my daughter wants to go to Africa. So they gave her information and took my phone number. And within 1 month, I was approved to go to Africa, to Tanzania. Yeah, I was like, oh, Lord, you weren't kidding. This is awesome. So I started raising funds, and the goal was for me to be in Tanzania, Moshi, Tanzania, in March of 2019. I'm like, all right, this is doable. In January of 2019, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And you know what I did? I laughed. I laughed so much that my family had thought I had completely lost my mind. I mean, like, really, they're like, you probably need to see somebody. But the reason I laughed is because I had walked with God long enough to know that he would not bring me this far to leave me there. And so I told the doctors, whatever you need to do, do it. But you have a very short amount of time because I'm heading to Africa. They don't like to hear that, but they did it. So I had surgeries and radiation, all the fun things. And in October of 2019, 20 years from when I was called, I landed in Tanzania. It was incredible, absolutely incredible. In fact, funny story, I'm not so much now, terrified of grasshoppers and crickets, like insane. I've pushed people into lockers in a school, in a borrow pit once, down a highway because there was a grasshopper, and I was like, ah! And go tearing down the highway, oh my gosh, you know. I've jumped out of moving vehicles. So the day I arrived in a wheat field, it was really awesome. The day I arrived in Tanzania, they had a hatch, very large hatch of these ginormous crickets. I have pictures, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get over this fear real fast, and I did. So I arrived in Tanzania, and there was a problem that we didn't know ahead of time, which was the government had shifted in their ideology of what they wanted in the country. And there was only 2 kinds of people besides nationals that they wanted, and we were not those kind of people. So I applied for a visa along with other missionaries, and all of us were denied. And the head missionaries looked at me and said, if you're denied, nobody's going to get in. They were kicking out doctors and nurses. People who had been there for over 50 years were required to leave the country. But then something funny happened. COVID hit, and they closed the country. So we were able to do some stuff. Right before COVID hit, we knew we had a short amount of time before we would have to leave. And so there's a pastor named Pastor Naomi, and she has a church on Mount Kilimanjaro. So I lived right at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro. And her church, she found out people were walking 3.5 hours up the mountain on Sundays to attend church. 3.5 hours to attend church. And so she said, I have to do something about this. And so she called us and asked if we would be willing to help with a church plant. We said, absolutely. So we sent money for them to buy land and build a church. And then they asked us to do like a crusade to let the people, and the town is called Equini, to let the people in Equini know that we were there, there's a church. And so we said, absolutely, we'll be there. And a couple days later, she called and said, I just want to give you a heads up that the witch doctors and the head of another religious group the witch doctors have put spells on you, have cast spells on you, and the head guy of this other religious group has told his congregants that if they come see you, they're going to go to hell, and he's also threatened to kill you. So we said, well, let's go. This is fantastic. But we went prepared, so we prayed and we fasted, and we went. So this is we were in a clearing in the forest on Mount Kilimanjaro, and these are some of the people. So they had us kind of sit into the side of them. That way they could stare at us easier. It's much nicer. And so we're sitting there listening to the head missionary, Nate Lashway. He was preaching, and I see movement in the bushes. And I turn and look, and there are people hiding in the bushes and behind trees all around us. I mean, like, all the way around us. I'm like, oh, that's not good. And I looked at where our land cruiser was versus where we were, and thought, there's not a chance. So I leaned over to another missionary sitting next to me. I said, do you see those people? And she said, yes. I'm like, well, let's enjoy. So we enjoyed the service, and nobody bothered us. Nobody said anything. At the end of the service, one person came up and gave his life to Christ. We prayed for him, and then we left. A couple days later, Pastor Naomi called us and said 33 people had given their lives to Christ. 32 were in the bushes. Yeah. That's the church. That's Pastor Naomi, and then the pastor who took over that church. They built it. That's how they wanted it. After the first week, they had to tear down the sidewall because it was completely full of people. It's actually quite big. It's not a great angle for it, but yeah. So it was amazing. People just filled the church immediately. So we realized we're going to have to leave, and so Nate and Tammy had to make a decision on where we were going to go. And the options were Uganda or Burundi. Oh, this is one thing we got to do is give this woman, she's a grandmother who's caring for her grandkids. Their parents had both passed away, and she had nothing. She had no money, no nothing. And we were able to give her rice, maize, and oil to be able to feed her grandkids. She gave permission for the picture. All the pictures, people gave permission. And then there's one more picture. And these kids are all orphans. They're super sweet, and we were able to deliver some food to them and some school stuff. Yeah, absolute sweethearts. Thank you. Okay, anyway, so we had to decide between Uganda and Burundi, and I didn't know where Burundi was, but I knew Uganda. And I was like, oh, Lord, please let it be Uganda. They have paved roads. They speak English. There are restaurants and stores. So it was Burundi, because that's how that goes. Like, and they invited me to join them, and I said, okay, dokie, I can do that. So I had to find out where Burundi was, which was right next to Tanzania. Completely missed it. It's a very small country. It's the same size as the state of Maryland, Maryland has 6 million people. Burundi has 12 million people. I had made a really bad joke on accident once. Do you want to hear it? Okay, I'm so sorry. It's kind of funny though. So I didn't mean to. I said, Burundi has 12 million people. There's people on top of people, and that's how we get more people. Then I was like, oh! I hadn't even thought it before, and there it was. Sorry. If I've offended, I apologize greatly. So, biology lesson for the day. Anyway, so Burundi has had a really rough history. They're right below the country of Rwanda, but the same people groups, the Hutu and the Tutsi. Many of you have heard of the genocide that happened in Rwanda. It started in April of 1994. It went 100 days, and 800,000 people were killed. That's the best guess, and most of them by machete. What people don't realize is Burundi's had 3 genocides. The last one started in November of 93 and went 13 years. And it hasn't truly stopped. So it's a country that's had horrific turmoil and tragedy. And so we had to learn all about this before we went. And we arrived in Burundi, and the head of the Burundi Assemblies of God, his name is Pastor Jerome. He is the most godly, humble, kind man. He has got the craziest, coolest stories of God working in his life and for his family and for the country. He came to me knowing my history and asked if I would be willing to do trauma healing for his pastors. I said, absolutely. And so I started taking classes in the middle of the night because they were set in the United States, but they're for Africa. And so I took classes to be trained as be able to do trauma healing for Africans. And then the story started, and 3 of those stories I'm allowed to tell. One pastor said, I don't know how God can ever forgive me. I killed so many people. Another pastor said, I don't know how I can ever forgive them. They killed my mother in front of me and cut her unborn baby from her body. And another pastor's wife stood up and said, it's not that I can't forgive, it's that I can't forget. She has a scar across her face where someone from the other tribe attempted to behead her, but was unsuccessful, and that person was her husband. They do have a very happy marriage now, but when they look at each other, they see that tragedy and that trauma. So I said, absolutely, I can do this, I think, by God. And so I got everything together, we started, and I hadn't been feeling well at all. And so in May, the end of May 2021, I think, I was sent to Kenya to get some blood work. So as a missionary in Africa, we regularly have worms. I don't know, we're good. You can come talk to me, you won't catch anything. But that's just something we deal with. You just deworm twice a year. So I was like, I have got some kind of weird parasite, so I did this like massive parasite cleanse that caused me to hallucinate. It was quite exciting. Loved it. Made for a very interesting week, but I still had to go to language school because I have to learn French and Kirundi and Swahili. So I headed to Kenya to figure out what was going on, and they did a colonoscopy. African medical is something that no one should have to experience but me. Okay, so I had a colonoscopy. I wake up in a room full of people because everyone is all together, and there was something at my feet. And if you have ever had a colonoscopy or been put under a bit, when you wake up, you're a little confused. So there's something at my feet. I'm like, what is this? And so I'm moving my feet around trying to figure out, what is going on here? What is this? And there's cats wandering around the hospital. Their mousers are excellent. And so I'm like, what is going on? And I sat up and looked, and it was someone else's feet were on my bed because they were too long for their bed, so they just shoved us together. So I'm probably married to a Maasai man somewhere, and I'm unaware of it. Yeah. He's probably nice. Anyway, so I wandered up to my doctor's office, very drugged out of my mind and confused, and a little horrified. And she let me know that it was definitely cancer, and it was pretty advanced. And so I was diagnosed with stage 3B colon cancer. I'm like, ay vey. It wasn't so funny this time. But I got permission to stay on the continent, and I flew to South Africa like the next week, or later that week, and I got to go see the penguins. If you ever get a chance, go to South Africa, see the penguins, they're pretty awesome. And I had a little bit of my colon removed, put together, everything's fine, headed back up to Kenya, and I was able to do chemotherapy there. One really cool thing is, again, if you let God use you, he will. So I was in Nairobi on a compound with other missionaries who are like the heads of their fields in East Africa or all of Africa. And they got to learn about me. So they learned that I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I have some ability to do things, and I've been doing it a long time. And so they allowed me to do counseling for other Assembly of God missionaries throughout the continent. And there's a lot of us. I don't even know how many, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And so there's 5 of us total that are doing counseling for all the missionaries in Africa. They also let me teach psychological first aid in Africa and the Middle East. Now, mind you, I'm doing this while I'm doing chemo. They did not get my best, but I was certainly entertaining. So I'm teaching psychological first aid so that if there's a terrorist attack or if there's something bad that happens on a team, other people on the team can help that person until one of us counselors can get to them or until they can get home, which is an amazing program, and I'm glad that they have it. I also got put on a team to help develop the plan for if there's ever child abuse, neglect, anything for our missionary kids throughout the continent, because that's really important. We need to protect the children and make sure that they are kept safe. So had I not been in Kenya, I would not have been able to do this, and I thought that was really, really cool. Oh, can I tell you one really cool story in South Africa? So I'm in the hospital, and I was in ICU for like 5 days. I had a little bit of a blood issue. In fact, they were like, we need to give you blood. What's your blood type? I'm like, oh, negative. They're like, we don't have that. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Because it's the only kind I can get. They figured it out, apparently. Either that or I don't know what they did. I'm alive. That's what matters. So I was in the hospital, and the head nurses are called sisters. That can be male or female, that they're sisters. And on the unit I got put on, there was 5 of us or 6 of us in one room, one bathroom. Everyone was really patient and kind with each other. One night, the children were running up and down the hallway, and I was not hallucinating this time. Like, all of us are like, what is going on? But the nurses had brought their kids in, and the unit was very chaotic. Nobody was sleeping, and the nurses were really struggling to be kind, and the sisters were done with it. So one sister came in the morning, and mind you, I'm the only American that I know of, and I'm definitely the only missionary, and so I had all eyes on me. So the sister came in and looked at me, and she goes, "Are you a Christian?" I'm like, yes. Now, mind you, I want to be a little ornery because I'm tired, I am not happy, I don't feel good, and it's not been a great day. But I'm like, yes. And she looks at me, she asks, "Can you get me a Bible?" I'm like, yeah, in what language? And she said English. And I said, yeah, I can do that. So I contacted the head of missions I was in Pretoria, South Africa, and asked if that was possible. And she said, no, it's not. There's no Bibles. I'm like, what? She said, yeah, with the supply chain, there's no Bibles. There's nothing in the bookstores. I'm like, oh, crud. And so she goes, I'll see what I can do. So all day long, she had a 12-hour shift. This sister kept coming in and asking me, do you have my Bible yet? I'm like, not yet, it's coming. Oh, Lord, please let it come. At 5 o'clock, she got off at 6. At 5 o'clock, a huge bouquet of flowers came in and a Bible. I'm like, oh, Lord, thank you so much. And she came in, and I said, sister, I have your Bible. And I handed it to her, and she held it against her chest and wept. And I thought, if all of this was for that, it was so worth it. So worth it. So that was really, really cool, how God can use things like that. Oh, do you mind if I back up for a second? about Tanzania. So our church in Tanzania that we regularly attended was KICC, and it's Kilimanjaro International Christian Church or something like that. And they had a really big heart for orphans, which is not a common occurrence. And so there was a group of orphans that would sit kind of near me, little sweethearts. But to be an orphan in Africa is one of the hardest things you could possibly be. You are really ostracized. You're not accepted by the community normally. You can't go to school because you can't afford school fees or your uniform, which is required. And so they're often just street kids wandering around, stealing, doing whatever they can to eat. So these kids are sitting by me, and they're being taken care of. And we were worshiping, and this song was in English, which wasn't normal, and it was The Goodness of God. And I looked over at them, and they were singing with their whole hearts. And I just wonder, is it okay if I read this to you? They said, "I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Because all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire. In darkest night, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God." And I tell you what, watching them sing that, knowing how hard their lives are, I know I can do anything with God. If he puts it before me, I can do it. So I finished chemo, headed back to the States to itinerate to go back. I was a missionary associate originally, which means I work under another missionary and do whatever they want me to do. But then I got approved as a fully appointed missionary. So you're saying I'm doing this for life kind of thing. So I came back to the States to do training and raise funds. And in December of 2022, I had to head to South Africa for about a month for a conference. And I also do most of my medical over there because it's free, thank you, insurance. And so I was doing all of that and did all my scans, and my doctor called me and said, "Hey, bad news, you're stage 4, and it's in your liver and your lungs." Oh, well, that's hilarious. So again, I laughed. And Tammy Lashway, who's my boss, Tammy and Nate are my bosses, Tammy's like, "You've got to stop laughing." And I'm like, "Haha, but it's funny." In fact, when I originally found out, I was looking at a report, because I send you the report ahead of time. I was standing in a department store in Pretoria, no, I was in Johannesburg, South Africa. All my luggage was lost somewhere in Europe. I think it was Europe. I'm not exactly sure where it was at. And so I needed pajamas. And my pajamas that I found said, "The best is yet to come." And I'm holding these pajamas, looking at this report going, "Oh, that's hilarious." Anyway, so I finished up my time in South Africa, got everything done, and I came home. And I didn't tell anybody, but my plan was just to die. I was done. I don't know if you have ever felt done. I was tired. I was emotionally tired. I was physically tired. I could not do anymore. I said, "Lord, this is it. I'm done." And so my former pastor, when I was growing up, he was speaking at a conference I had to attend, and I just loved this man, Pastor Warnicki. And so I decided I was going to ask him if he would do my funeral. And so I had a plan. He's going to come up and ask me how I'm doing, like everyone else is, "How you doing? How you doing?" He came up to me and he said, "I am so excited, Anna. There is a new cancer treatment for me, and I get to do it for a whole year, and they're covering the cost. I've never been so excited." I'm just like, oh, if you have hope, I probably should too. So I'm like, "Oh, fine, okay." And that's really my attitude of it, fine. So I call my doctor, and I decided to do everything here this time, because when I was doing it in Africa, I was alone, and I thought I needed a little more support. So I called my doctor, and I said, "Whatever you need to do, let's do it." And so he did. So this is why I have chemo curls now. They're completely uncontrollable. Spectacular. I think I look kind of cute. It works out. So I did chemotherapy. I did a little radiation. Oh, they cut out part of my liver. Did you know that regenerates? How exciting. I'm like put together with pieces and duct tape here, but it works. And in January, they're like, I think you might be okay. And in April, they said, you're okay, you can head back. So, hopefully very soon, thank you. Hopefully very soon, I'm hoping this summer I will be able to head back to Burundi. There's so much stuff happening. There was a crusade a bit ago where in 4 days, 30,000 people came to hear the speaker, and 9,000 people gave their lives to Christ. 9,000 people. God is the only one that can fix that country and help those people and heal them completely. And I can't wait to be a part of it again. So I want to thank you all so much for your prayers and support. This is the only reason I get to do this. And so thank you again. Also, the whole time I've been working, doing counseling for missionaries. They've been incredible with me and letting me still work, even though I had been on medical leave for about a year. But, can you keep going through the pictures? There's one, it's a church, it looks like the inside of a barn, but it's a church. Oh, so okay, that last picture, she's in Bible school. She's wanting to be a pastor, but she doesn't read or write, and so that's one of our interpreters, and so he was reading it to her. Isn't that incredible? Oh, God is good. Okay, you can keep going, thank you. These are just some of the amazing people of Burundi. Burundi is the second poorest nation on the planet. We were number 1, but another country went to war. So now we're number 2, which is good. He's in our church planting school. Oh, I miss them so much. Look at that little sweetheart. This was at a church. They were sitting outside. And this is at our church planting school. He's worshiping. That's a Maasai. This is a Maasai school. This is in Burundi. Oh. And these guys were watching the Jesus film. So you see people up in the tree so that they could see the film. Okay, so this one, hold on. This church, I was telling Russ and Chris, so that's, oh, I forgot his name, Mike Silvanen. He and his family were missionaries with us in Burundi. They've taken a step back. I had just preached, and then he was. And I was looking up at the ceiling. I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. It's like stars. Well, every Tuesday night, they had prayer, and they met at the altar. And they did this through the genocides. They did this through the uprisings, everything. Nothing stopped them. One Tuesday night, nobody could make it. Like, everything was going wrong, so they didn't show up. And that Tuesday night, somebody threw a grenade into the church, and it landed at the altar. So what you're seeing is holes from the shrapnel. Is that not crazy how God is so good to us? Ah, oh, he's so faithful. Anyway, you can keep going. Thank you. Look at that baby. Oh, my gosh. Oh, and that's her little sister, or bigger sister. But, oh, little sweethearts. This is during church. And that's Burundi. It's from my bedroom window, I can see the Congo, which is a huge part of my heart because that's the country that called me to Africa. Yeah. This is in worship. This is one of the biggest churches. It's the biggest Assemblies of God church in all of Burundi. It's huge. Yep. And they worship for like an hour, just dancing and singing and praising. Ah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much for showing those. Anyway, thank you all of you for listening to me and encouraging and praying. I really, really appreciate it. I do have prayer cards at the back if you're willing to take one. But thank you for your time today.